Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are here to take the most rigorous, dense regulatory frameworks, strip them down to their essentials, and hand you the intellectual key to understanding the systems that govern some of the world's most critical sectors.
And today, we are definitely strapping in.
We are. Today's deep exploration is into institutional quality assurance in higher education.
Specifically, we are tackling the Institutional Standards Assessment Manual version 2. This is the latest one, published in February 2024 by the Oman Authority for Academic Accreditation and Quality Assurance of Education, OAAQA, for short.
Right, OAAQA. It's an intimidating title, for sure, but trust us when we say the underlying logic is, well, it's actually quite brilliant.
It really is.
And that's precisely our mission today. This deep dive is all about transforming what looks like an impenetrable regulatory document into a clear, compelling roadmap.
I mean, if you, the listener, need to understand the heartbeat of higher education governance and quality in Oman, this manual is the EKG reading.
Exactly. We want to show you that this system isn't just complex bureaucracy. It's actually easy and logical if you understand its structure and its purpose.
And that purpose is significant. We're here to understand the core logic and structure of HE accreditation. We're focusing on the minimum expectations and, the practical steps institutions have to follow to demonstrate that they have enduring quality.
So it's not about surface compliance.
Not at all. It's about moving from complexity to undeniable clarity.
The scope is ambitious.
Yeah.
We're covering the 6 major institutional standards. I mean, the full spectrum, from governance all the way to alumni engagement, and the methodology used for assessment.
It's important to set the stage here. This entire quality system is mandated by Royal Decree 9/2021.
So it has real legal teeth.
It absolutely does. And it builds directly on the requirements for Oman's system of quality assurance in higher education, or RSUA, which was first established way back in 2004.
What gives this framework its intellectual weight, I think, is its absolute alignment with national goals.
That's the key. These standards reflect Oman's national priorities, and they are fundamentally tied to Oman Vision 2040.
So when an HEI, a higher education institution, seeks accreditation, they're not just taking a box.
No, they're proving their commitment to national development. They're incorporating specific needs ranging from, national health and safety, human rights awareness, integration of labor market needs, and, of course, adherence to the higher education law.
So quality assurance here is really a core tool for strategic national advancement.
That's it, exactly.
Okay, let's unpack the foundational philosophy. You mentioned that this system is logical, but often, when we look at accreditation standards, the sheer volume of requirements makes them feel anything but. Where does the manual start in defining its own purpose?
It starts with a crucial definition of the bar. The ISAA manual explicitly states that these institutional standards represent the minimum standards.
Minimum. That word seems vital.
It is. These are the internationally recognized threshold requirements for higher education institutions to be considered in good standing. And achieving accredited status is, it's black and white. An HEI must successfully meet all 6 standards.
So if the ultimate goal is continuous enhancement, that phrase quality enhancement we hear so much about, why does the manual focus so intensely on setting only the minimum threshold?
That's a great question.
I mean, doesn't setting a low floor potentially discourage institutions from aiming higher?
You'd think so, but the answer really lies in legal accountability and stakeholder trust. You need a legally defensible baseline.
A floor.
A floor, exactly. By defining the minimum, OAAQA establishes a consistent floor of acceptable systematic operational quality across a very diverse higher education sector. Excellence is encouraged and rewarded through other mechanisms,
But failure to meet this minimum carries immediate and public consequences.
Right. This guarantees the public, students, parents, employers, that any accredited institution meets the basic standards of rigor and stability.
That makes perfect sense. It's a guarantee of stability before you even start pursuing spectacular performance.
Exactly. And because the sector is so diverse, the standards are phrased to be generically applicable across all HEIs nationwide.
Are there any exceptions?
There is one very rare exception noted in the manual. HEIs exclusively in the military sector may apply to OAAQA for an exemption from a specific criterion or a subpart.
But it's not easy, I assume.
Not at all. It requires formal written approval, and critically, the application has to be submitted a full year prior to the self-assessment date.
A whole year.
A whole year. So it's not an escape route. It's a necessary accommodation for, highly specialized operational requirements.
Let's clarify the structure itself. For you listening and trying to navigate this, we're dealing with three clearly defined levels of organization: standards, criteria, and indicators.
Yeah.
That hierarchy seems essential for turning noise into data.
It is the backbone of the clarity. The standard is level 1. It's the broad area statement that prescribes the minimum expected level of quality.
And there are 6 of those.
6 standards, all applicable to every single HEI. Below that, you have the criteria, which is level 2. Each standard is broken down into numerous criteria, 45 in total, across the 6 standards.
And these are the specific, measurable requirements that the HEI has to address in its self-assessment report.
Precisely.
And then we reach that third level, the indicators, which the manual explicitly describes as guidelines only. Why even include them if they aren't mandatory?
This is where institutional flexibility comes in. The indicators suggest ways an HEI can demonstrate compliance with a criterion.
So they're like examples.
Exactly. They provide examples, but they are not prescriptive. OAAEQA recognizes that, say, a technical college might demonstrate quality differently than a liberal arts university.
Right.
Therefore, the HEI has the flexibility to use its own benchmarked and justified indicators, provided they can still definitively prove they meet the core quality requirement of the criterion. It allows for individuality without sacrificing rigor.
This structure points us toward what you called the core intellectual engine of the assessment process, the ADRI method. For those working in quality or policy, understanding the ADRI cycle, that's approach, deployment, results, improvement, is probably the fastest shortcut to mastering the ISAA manual.
It absolutely is. The ADRI cycle is what transforms the ISAA manual from a regulatory checklist into a genuine quality management system. It's the essential framework HEIs must use to structure their self-assessment commentary, the ISAA.
And that's what makes it logical.
That's what makes the process inherently logical and cyclical. It moves beyond simple documentation to proven efficacy. It really is the key to making all this complexity easy to manage.
Let's break down these 4 pillars, and crucially, let's talk about what makes an HEI fail at each step, starting with approach, A.
Okay, so approach is the design element. It's the HEI's systems, their policies, their procedures, and their plans.
It answers the what and the why.
Right. What are we intending to do, and why is this the best method to achieve the desired outcome? A failure here is often a failure of alignment or design.
Can you give an example?
Sure, an HEI might submit a policy that is perfectly written, beautifully formatted, but it directly conflicts with national law or, the institution's own mission.
So even if the document itself is great.
The panel then finds the approach fundamentally flawed, even if it's beautifully articulated.
Okay, next up, deployment. D. This is implementation. We often see institutions with great policies that just live in a binder on a shelf. How does the ADRI model ensure deployment is real?
Deployment asks, how is the approach put into widespread effect? It's the do part.
The action.
The action. Evidence for deployment is critical and often involves looking at the lived experiences of staff and students. It's not enough to show a policy exists. You have to show the policy is working consistently across all relevant units.
So what's that evidence look like?
It could be operational logs, meeting minutes, showing a policy review, resource checks, and most crucially, interviews.
And a common failure.
A common deployment failure is patchy implementation. For instance, a plagiarism policy exists, but only 1 out of 10 departments actually implements the required software checks. That's not deployed.
And then we hit results. This is about measuring success. If you flawlessly execute a plan but never measure the outcome, the effort is essentially invisible to the panel, isn't it?
Completely invisible. Results focus on the measurable outcomes achieved. And the key mandate here is demonstrating a causal relationship between your approach, your deployment, and the resulting outcome.
This is where many institutions stumble, I imagine.
It is. They might present positive results, say a 90% student satisfaction rate, but they fail to connect it causally to their specific new student support strategy, their A and D.
So you can't just point to a good number.
No. If the HEI cannot prove the result was due to their deployed system, the panel has to conclude the outcome arose by chance, which makes it unsustainable and therefore inadequate for quality assurance purposes.
And the results have to be measurable.
Measurable, yes, quantitative or qualitative. And the manual heavily encourages using ratios or percentages over raw numbers because they're far easier for the panel to interpret meaningfully across different sized institutions.
Finally, the critical component that distinguishes quality compliance from quality enhancement: improvement. The loop has to close here.
It has to. Improvement is the evidence that the results fed back into revisions, adaptations, and systematic learning. It demonstrates continuous quality enhancement.
So did the annual performance data, the R trigger, a review of the strategic plan, the A?
Exactly. Were the systems adapted when results showed a shortfall? This is where the HEI demonstrates that it is a learning organization. A classic failure of the improvement stage is what we call the shelfware policy.
Shelfware.
A document that hasn't been reviewed or updated in 3 years, despite clear evidence, the results, that its performance metrics were missed. The ADRI cycle forces every single criterion into this structured thought process.
And that's what makes the assessment logical rather than overwhelming.
That's the key.
The ADRI structure truly is the key to unlocking the entire manual. With that in place, let's jump into the content itself, starting with Standard 1, Governance and Management. This feels like the non-negotiable bedrock ensuring institutional direction, accountability, and stability.
It is. And Standard 1 starts exactly where it should, with the institution's DNA. Criterion 1.1, mission, vision, and values.
So what it says on the tin.
Well, yes, but with teeth. The mission has to clearly define the institution's core purpose, its target communities, and its long-term aspirations.
The challenge, I imagine, is ensuring this mission isn't just internal marketing jargon.
Precisely. And the manual mandates mandatory alignment. The mission and vision must harmonize with national priorities, which means OMEN Vision 2040 community expectations and contemporary international developments in higher education.
And the process itself is audited.
It is. It has to involve direct consultation with internal and external stakeholders, employers, alumni, community leaders, and it has to receive formal, documented approval by the governing body.
So if the panel finds evidence that the mission was just drafted in a bubble by senior management without external consultation,
that's a deployment failure, and the entire criterion is compromised regardless of how well written the document is.
Okay, moving to Criterion 1.4, Strategic and Operational Planning. Given how quickly the higher education landscape changes, plans have to be agile.
The emphasis here is on the dynamic nature of planning. Plans have to be regularly assessed, revised, and adapted in response to internal shifts like student body growth or staffing turnover, and external changes like new labor market needs or technological demands.
And there's an accountability loop built in.
A stringent one. Performance against those plans has to be reviewed at least annually, reported upward to management and governance bodies, and explicitly used to inform the subsequent planning cycle.
So it connects back to ADRI.
Perfectly. If the annual report, the R, shows a target was missed, the new strategic plan, the A, must demonstrate how that shortfall was integrated into remedial action. That's the I, improvement.
This leads us directly to continuity and stability under Criterion 1.5, Risk Management. In many sectors, financial failure is often the biggest risk. Does the manual prioritize this?
It absolutely does. The required risk management system has to be comprehensive. It needs to cover strategic, operational, legal, reputational, and regulatory risks.
The whole gamut.
The whole 9 yards. But the financial safeguards are critical. The HEI must have rigorous policies to manage funds and, crucially, maintain sufficient financial reserves.
That sounds like a structural requirement.
It is. It's designed to act as a prophylactic measure against institutional collapse. If an unexpected external shock occurs, say a sudden drop in enrollment or a major litigation, the HEI has to demonstrate that it has the financial buffer.
Verified by independent external audits.
Right, to maintain continuity of operations.
No.
A weak rating here implies a fundamental instability in governance that affects the entire institution.
That requirement alone shows that Standard 1 is about survival and stability, not just efficiency. Next, Criterion 1.6, Quality Management System, QMS. We talked about culture over compliance earlier. How does the manual force that culture shift?
The QMS has to be built on the principles of quality enhancement and improvement, fostering a genuine, pervasive culture of quality.
So it's not about just having a QMS unit.
No, it's about demonstrating that quality thinking permeates the entire organization, from the library staff to the senior vice president.
That sounds like it demands serious infrastructure investment.
It does. A dedicated, adequately resourced unit, and that means funded, staffed by qualified quality professionals, not just administrative assistants, responsible for designing and deploying the QMS.
And it needs oversight.
Robust oversight through internal review processes like internal audits and regular external reviews like program accreditation visits. The panel is looking for interviews where staff across departments naturally speak in the language of quality enhancement.
I can just imagine an institution writing a perfect QMS policy. the approach. But if staff interviews show they don't even know who the QMS unit is, that's a deployment failure.
It is, and the criterion won't be met. Deployment is key, and that deployment needs infrastructure, which brings us to the physical aspects still under Standard 1.
Let's talk about Criterion 1.8, physical infrastructure and campus facilities management. This links the governance structure right back to the daily student experience.
This criterion ensures the physical environment supports the educational mission. Facilities must be purposefully designed for all modes of learning, face-to-face, blended, or fully online.
Which means suitable classrooms, labs, studios.
All of that, and robust office space for staff. But the manual also requires essential support facilities like healthcare rooms, prayer rooms, and dedicated spaces for student activities.
And the emphasis on inclusion here is very clear, demanding accommodation for male and female students, and critically, students with special needs.
That is a non-negotiable baseline. Access and appropriateness for all users must be demonstrated. If a specialized facility is required by a program, say a wind tunnel for engineering, that facility must be demonstrably operational, maintained, and accessible.
So a failure to maintain the physical infrastructure is a failure of governance deployment.
Precisely.
We've established a stable governance environment. Now we move into the actual delivery of education with Standard 2, academic provision and resources. This is where the core teaching and learning quality is assessed.
Right. And we begin with the educational contract. Criterion 2.1, graduate attributes. These define the intellectual, professional, and personal characteristics the HEI promises its students will possess upon graduation.
It's more than just technical competence.
Much more.
So how does an HEI ensure these attributes aren't just vague concepts?
They have to be definable, measurable, and demonstrably integrated into the curriculum. HEIs must define generic attributes for all graduates, align them explicitly with labor market needs and national priorities, and ensure they are communicated and integrated into all program designs and deliveries.
So the panel will actually look at course outlines and assessment rubrics.
Absolutely. They'll look for where, specifically, critical thinking or ethical awareness, for example, is being taught and assessed.
And the manual is very clear about equity across different delivery modes.
It's absolutely vital. Learning opportunities must ensure students in all modes, face-to-face, blended, or online, achieve the exact same defined graduate attributes.
So no differential outcomes.
None. There can be no difference based on delivery method. This means assessment methods and required learning hours have to be rigorously compared and benchmarked, forcing the institution to prove true pedagogical equivalence.
That equity mandate carries over into Criterion 2.4, Teaching and Learning Framework.
It does. The framework has to be clearly formulated and genuinely inclusive, encompassing all modes of learning. It has to purposefully inform every step, from curriculum design and course delivery to student assessment, all enabling the achievement of those core graduate attributes.
So if the HEI introduces a new blended learning approach,
the framework must be immediately updated to reflect the pedagogical justification and the specific training required for staff to deploy it effectively.
let's discuss the modern backbone of education. Technology under Criterion 2.6. Information and educational technology resources. This isn't just about fast Wi-Fi anymore, is it? It's about educational resilience.
It really is. It demands a robust, resilient infrastructure networks, learning management systems, specialized software that can support delivery, research, and operations efficiently and securely.
But it's more than the hardware.
Much more. Beyond the physical hardware, the panel looks at policies ensuring currency, continuity like disaster recovery plans, security, and accessibility.
What stands out here is the financial and operational commitment required.
Yes, there has to be adequate budget allocation, not just for procurement, but for maintenance and support. And that support must be readily available for both staff and students, including addressing the complexities of bring your own device or BYOD models.
And what if an HEI offers blended or online learning?
Then they must have specific, tailored policies governing the technology stack used for those modes, including reliable identity verification systems for online assessments. And if IT services are outsourced, which is common,
The HEI is still responsible.
they maintained full oversight and contractual control to ensure data security and continuity of service, especially protecting student personal information. They can't just pass the buck.
Okay, finally, a seemingly simple but profoundly important technical requirement in Criteria 2.7. Academic honesty and integrity. The requirement for a unified referencing system across all programs seems highly specific for an accreditation manual. Why mandate MLA, APA, or Harvard?
That's a fantastic point that moves beyond mere compliance. Why standardize the style?
Right, what does it matter?
Because integrity is demonstrated through consistent practice. Mandating a unified referencing system, whether it's MLA, APA, or Harvard forces standardization, not just in formatting, but in the teaching of citation and intellectual property rules across all programs.
So it eliminates the institutional chaos where different departments use different, sometimes ambiguous systems.
Exactly. This standardization makes it easier to proactively promote a genuine culture of academic integrity by making the rules clear, thus facilitating the consistent education of staff and students about all forms of misconduct, copyright, and intellectual property.
So it's not just about aesthetics, it's about making the integrity training enforceable and consistent.
Absolutely. And just like graduate attributes, these integrity policies must be consistently implemented across all modes of learning. You need equivalent mechanisms for assessment security and identity checks, whether the student is sitting in a physical exam room or taking a proctored online final.
Shifting focus now to the core consumer of the educational service, the student. Standard 3. Students and student support services zeroes in on welfare, fairness, and amplification of the student voice.
And the systems governing student appeals and grievances are paramount for fairness. Criterion 3.2. Student appeals and grievances requires policies that are transparent, fair, and impartial.
And they must explicitly protect students against punitive action or discrimination when they lodge a grievance or appeal.
Right. This is about building a culture where students feel safe to challenge a grade or an administrative decision without fear of retaliation.
This is a perfect place to apply the ADRI improvement loop. How does the manual ensure these fairness mechanisms actually enhance quality rather than just solving isolated cases?
It demands the closing of the loop. Outcomes from appeals and grievances, the results, or R, must be systematically collected, analyzed, and actively used to enhance quality and inform future reviews of academic programs and support services. That's the I, improvement.
So, for example, if the institution sees a statistically significant increase in grievances related to a single module's assessment strategy,
That's your R. The institution must then demonstrate that the program review committee acted on that data to revise the assessment policy. That's your I.
and if the data is collected but just sits in a folder,
Then the criterion is only partially met because improvement hasn't been demonstrated.
let's discuss student life support under Criterion 3.5. Accommodation, catering, and transportation. These seem highly operational, yet they're critical to well-being.
They're fundamental to student welfare and safety. The HEI must ensure access to adequate, safe, and appropriate accommodation, healthy and affordable catering services, and safe transportation where applicable.
But here's where governance extends, right? If services like catering, transportation, or security are outsourced to third parties,
The HEI must still maintain direct oversight. They cannot delegate accountability for safety and effective delivery. The contract has to stipulate performance metrics, and the HEI must conduct regular audits of contractor service quality and their adherence to safety protocols.
and ensuring the student perspective drives change is the focus of Criterion 3.8. Student satisfaction. How is their voice guaranteed?
Satisfaction has to be monitored regularly through formal, standardized mechanisms, primarily surveys. But beyond passive feedback, students have to be actively engaged through membership on decision-making committees at various levels,
Program department.
sometimes even governance. Furthermore, a formal student council must be established in line with national laws to formally represent the student voice.
And the crucial component here is the communication loop.
Yes. Actions taken in direct response to student feedback must be clearly reported and communicated back to the students, demonstrating that their input led to concrete, visible change. If the HEI conducts surveys but never publicly reports the resultant actions, the deployment of the feedback mechanism is incomplete.
Moving now to Standard 4. Human resources. None of the preceding standards can be met without a qualified, sufficient, and satisfied workforce.
Standard 4 ensures the HR strategy aligns with the institutional mission and national developmental goals. Criterion 4.1. Human resources planning and recruitment requires workforce planning to be explicitly aligned with the HEI's mission, strategic goals, and national objectives.
And this is where we explicitly encounter urbanization targets.
It is.
Let's pause and define that as it's a national policy embedded in the accreditation framework. What exactly are Omanization targets?
Omanization is the national objective to increase the employment of Omani citizens across all sectors. For HEIs, this means workforce planning must include verifiable targets and strategies for recruiting, training, and retaining Omani nationals in both academic and administrative roles.
So the HEI has to contribute directly to the National Human Capital Development Strategy.
Yes, and the panel will look at specific ratios and annual improvement targets set by the HEI against this national mandate.
And going back to the specialized requirements for modern delivery, there's a specific requirement for staff expertise related to technology.
Yes. Academic staff recruited for blended or online programs must have demonstrated appropriate expertise and experience specifically in those technology-mediated modes.
So it's not enough to just hire a content expert.
No. They must also be a proven practitioner in the required mode of delivery, reflecting the specialized pedagogical skills needed for effective online instruction.
For staff retention and motivation, criterion 4.5. Staff performance planning and review is key. How does the manual ensure objectivity and fairness in career progression?
The procedures must be fair, objective, and transparently communicated. Review outcomes must be documented confidentially, and staff must have clear opportunities to appeal review findings.
So no opaque decision-making is permitted.
None. The processes for promotions and incentives have to be objective, evidence-based, and fairly awarded based on clearly specified, published criteria.
And it extends to the top.
It does. A significant inclusion here is that review procedures must also extend to the HEI's most senior appointments, the vice chancellor, president, or dean, who must be reviewed periodically by members of the governing bodies to ensure top-level accountability is also evidence-based.
Finally, retention and staff engagement under criterion 4.7. Staff satisfaction and retention.
The HEI must be actively committed to maintaining a positive work climate. Staff satisfaction and retention are monitored regularly through formal, confidential mechanisms like staff climate surveys.
And like with students, they need representation.
Exactly, mirroring the requirements for students. Both academic and non-academic staff must be represented on decision-making committees, ensuring their expertise and perspective influence policy.
And critically, staff have to be informed of actions implemented based on their feedback.
Which demonstrates the ADRI loop in action for HR, showing that staff input leads to tangible, positive changes in the workplace.
Our focus now shifts to intellectual contribution and outreach. Span 5. Research and innovation moves the institution beyond internal operations and teaching toward generating new knowledge.
And the core requirement under Criterion 5.1. Research and innovation strategy and performance is alignment and funding. The strategy has to align with the HEI's mission, its institutional classification. Is it a teaching-focused college or a research university? And, again, national research priorities fundamentally linked to Oman Vision 2040.
So if an HEI states its goal is to be a research powerhouse, how does the panel verify that commitment?
They verify the deployment and results. The strategy has to be adequately funded. The panel will look at the budget allocation relative to the size of the institution and the ambitiousness of the plan.
And it needs measurable indicators.
Yes. Things like publications in peer-reviewed journals, successful grant applications, and graduate research completions. If the approach is ambitious, but the funding, the deployment is negligible, and the output, the results is low, the criterion fails, the panel seeks a clear causal link between investment and output.
A core concern in research is ethics, covered in detail under Criterion 5.3. Research ethics. This can't be handled retroactively, can it?
Absolutely not. This is mandatory and highly regulated. Any research involving human participants, animals, or genetic considerations must receive formal ethics clearance before any data collection or experimentation begins.
Before. That's the key word.
It is. The clearance must predate the activity. Otherwise, the research is deemed unethical by definition. The HEI has to establish an institutional review board or an equivalent body to manage this.
And the policies have to be comprehensive.
They do. They have to explicitly cover crucial ethical frameworks. Voluntary participation, informed consent, confidentiality, data handling, and managing complex ethical issues arising from joint research, particularly addressing fiduciary relationships where a staff member supervises a student to prevent coercion or exploitation.
And how is the gap between research and teaching closed? That's Criterion 5.5. Research and teaching linkages.
Research and scholarly activities have to be actively used to inform and enhance teaching and learning. This moves beyond simply telling students what the faculty is studying.
It requires clear mechanisms.
Yes, like research-led curricula, incorporating research methodologies into undergraduate teaching, or involving students in faculty projects with effectiveness mechanisms that are evaluated regularly. The question is the curriculum current because of the faculty's research? That's the link the panel's looking for.
Our final area, Standard 6, external engagement, focuses on building mutually beneficial relationships outside the campus walls.
And Criterion 6.1, engagement with industry ensures the HEI is not operating in isolation. Formal and informal industry relationships must serve multiple purposes.
Like enhancing student learning.
Identifying employer needs to ensure graduates have current employability skills, ensuring curriculum currency, securing internships or placements, and fostering direct research collaboration.
And there's a structural requirement here, too.
A critical one. An effective advisory board composed of industry representatives, which must meet regularly and whose minutes must demonstrate tangible input that informs academic provision.
Then there is the long-term relationship with former students under Criterion 6.4, engagement with alumni.
This requires ongoing, systematic relationship maintenance. The HEI has to maintain an up-to-date alumni database which explicitly tracks crucial post-graduation information like current employment status.
And they need formal mechanisms for engagement.
Like an established alumni association. And alumni should also be leveraged to provide input. They must be included as members of institutional and program-level committees, offering valuable, real-world feedback into the quality and relevance of academic provision.
Finally, we address how the HEI presents itself to the world in Criterion 6.5. External visibility and promotion. Transparency and image management are key here.
This demands that public relations and marketing meet high ethical standards. The HEI must accurately and truthfully represent its goals, programs, and services.
So, no exaggerated or misleading claims about job placement rates or program outcomes.
Absolutely prohibited. And transparency is enforced through the website requirements. It must contain up-to-date and transparent information, including tuition fees, the HEI's current accreditation status, and the identity of any degree-awarding bodies if the degrees are offered in partnership.
And to foster global standing, the manual suggests international involvement.
Yes, monitoring local and international rankings where applicable is encouraged, as is active membership in relevant international network organizations. This shows a commitment to global standards, visibility, and collaboration, reinforcing the HEI's presence on the international stage.
We've thoroughly covered the 6 standards. Now let's turn to the practical high-stakes assessment process itself, which is meticulously defined to ensure integrity, starting with the constitution of the review panel.
The panel is composed of expert external reviewers. They're sourced from the National Register of External Reviewers, encompassing both local and international expertise across various fields.
And the size varies.
It's calibrated to the HEI. Typically 3 members for smaller colleges, up to 5 for larger, more complex HEIs. This diversity of expertise is crucial for ensuring a balanced and credible judgment.
During the visit, a fundamental rule dictates the conduct of all interviews. The non-attribution rule, more commonly known as Chatham House rules. Why is this rule so central to the integrity of the data collected?
This rule is the single most important mechanism for ensuring candor and independence. Information gathered can and will be used in the ISAA report, but the identity of the person who provided it will never be revealed.
Not even to OA or AQA staff.
Not even to them. This absolute confidentiality is necessary to foster an environment where staff, students, and external stakeholders feel entirely safe to speak openly about genuine issues, shortcomings, or internal challenges without fear of institutional reprisal.
And there are rules for the interviewees as well.
Yes, they are strictly prohibited from taking notes or recording sessions, and HEIs cannot attempt to coach or pressure them afterward to disclose what was discussed. The integrity of the final report rests on the panel's ability to gather unbiased, independent data on the lived experience.
And the manual goes to extreme lengths to prevent any form of corruption or influence, with specific rules against undue influence.
The rules strictly prohibit the HEI from attempting to influence the panel or OAA-QA staff in any unauthorized way. This is taken as an attack on the integrity of the entire national system.
What counts as undue influence?
Prohibited acts include unauthorized communication, explicit or implied threats, promises of benefit, like a promotion or future contracts, or offering overly generous hospitality or expensive gifts.
And the consequences are severe.
The manual is very clear. Engaging in such acts can lead to the immediate termination of the entire ISA process and the HEI being placed immediately on probation. This shows just how seriously OAQA views the independence of the review process.
Let's discuss evidence. Under the ADRI framework, evidence must be persuasive. What makes a claim truly stick in the eyes of the panel?
Evidence has to demonstrate practice and deportment, not just intent. If you claim to have a student appeal process, you need to show the panel completed appeal forms, the associated investigation reports, and the minutes where the review committee discussed the outcome.
So, completed forms over blank templates.
Or survey results summaries over blank surveys. All evidence must be date-stamped and clearly linked to the specific criterion and the relevant ADRI component A, D, R, or I to manage the dynamic nature of institutional practice.
And there are strict limits on the volume of material. This emphasizes relevance over noise.
Absolutely. There are two types. Mandatory materials, limited to a maximum of 250 files, which must be submitted in the required format. These are the core policies and reports.
And the others.
Then there are supplementary materials, SMs, limited to 450, which provide additional context and justification for claims made in the self-assessment commentary. The HEI has to prioritize quality and direct relevance. Simply burying the panel in thousands of irrelevant documents is counterproductive.
Let's talk about the consequences of cutting corners, what you call the wet paint syndrome. Imagine a panel member finds a newly painted sign outside a library that says, "New QMS policy in effect," 3 days before the visit. How does the panel sniff out that kind of last-minute window dressing?
That is the quintessential wet paint syndrome. It's when an HEI introduces new systems or procedures just before the assessment without having tested them.
So under the ADRI framework,
If you have no deployment data, the D, and no results data, the R, you haven't demonstrated the system is operational or sustainable.
and how does the panel react?
Well, if the HEI is transparent about the newness, the panel might rate the criterion partially met, recognizing the intent, the A, but reserving judgment until demonstrated results and sustainability are confirmed.
But if they try to pretend it's been in place for a long time,
If the HEI attempts to present this new, untested system as standard sustained practice, that is, claiming deployment exists when it doesn't, it's seen as misleading, undermining the spirit of quality assurance, and it may negatively impact the panel's overall judgment of institutional integrity.
and what about intentional academic dishonesty in the submission itself? The manual is very clear on plagiarism.
Plagiarism in the ISA submission is an automatic failure point with the most severe immediate consequence.
Which is?
Any detected plagiarism results automatically in the HEI being placed on probation. This sends an unequivocal message that intellectual integrity is non-negotiable, not just for students, but for the senior administration authoring the ISA.
The ISA visit typically runs for 2.5 highly intensive days. How is the interview schedule structured to ensure comprehensive and independent data collection?
The schedule is meticulously planned and involves multiple formats, often running 6 to 10 sessions over the visit. Formal interviews are structured sessions with senior management, staff, alumni, and external stakeholders, where up to 8 interviewees are present to ensure comprehensive input.
And then there's a less formal option.
Yes, roundtable interviews. These are typically used for students and alumni in a less formal setting, with fewer participants, maybe about 5 interviewees per panel member, allowing for deeper, less guarded engagement.
Then we have the mechanism specifically designed to bypass institutional influence, the random interviews.
This is the pure independent data collection mechanism. Panel members conduct these unannounced meeting staff and students on campus, in the cafeteria, the library, foyers, or administrative areas, without any intervention or scheduling by the HEI.
And these have strict rules.
Very strict. They have to be short, typically less than 15 minutes. Confidential, of course, protected by the non-attribution rule. And they cannot interrupt any scheduled teaching sessions. This ensures the panel collects truly independent data on the lived experience of deployment.
It verifies if the policies documented in the ISA are actually followed on the ground.
Precisely.
And the final format, in situ interviews.
These are formal interviews conducted at the actual location being reviewed. For instance, interviewing library staff in the library right after a tour of the facility.
So the panel can immediately verify claims against the physical evidence.
Right. Are the staff sufficient? Are the resources accessible? Is the facility clean and well-maintained? It links right back to criterion 1.8.
Beyond the interviews, the logistics for the panel are highly controlled. What is the rationale behind the strict facility requirements, like the soundproof room and the rule against food smells?
These requirements are not just about comfort. They are fundamentally about safeguarding the integrity and confidentiality of the entire national accreditation system.
So the soundproof room is for confidentiality.
Exactly. It's to ensure that confidential interview responses cannot be overheard, which is crucial for upholding the non-attribution rule. The specific layout, which is detailed in Figure 4 of the manual, maintains professionalism and distance.
And the food smells.
Requiring a separate soundproofed room for lunch and explicitly noting that food smells should not linger in the main room is necessary because the panel often uses the lunch break for sensitive, confidential, internal deliberations. The review director's responsibility to lock the room during breaks ensures that no unauthorized persons access the confidential working documents or the panel's notes.
Once the intensive visit concludes, the HEI has a final chance to comment on the draft report. What is the scope of their commentary?
The HEI receives ISAA Report V5 for review. Their input is restricted to challenging specific areas: factual inaccuracies, demonstrable unfair or prejudiced judgment, significant omissions that prejudice the HEI's standing, or violations of due process during the visit.
So they can't argue the panel's professional judgment on quality.
No, only the integrity of the data used or the process that was followed.
And what is the absolute critical deadline for any evidence they submit to support these comments?
Any evidence submitted for comments must not post-date the last day of the ISAA visit. The evidence must have existed, been operational, and been available to the panel during the actual visit.
So no new policies written the week after the panel left.
Or performance data compiled the next month. None of that will be accepted. This rule reinforces that the assessment reflects the institution's state at the time of the review.
Finally, we arrive at the accreditation outcomes. The goal is public accountability.
Yes, the possible outcomes are clearly defined. Accredited, which means all 6 standards are met. Conditionally accredited, on probation, which means 1 or more standards are not met or not accredited.
But what I find fascinating and what distinguishes this from many ranking systems is the transparency mandate.
That is the ultimate public accountability mechanism. The outcomes, along with the detailed ratings against all 6 standards and all 45 criteria, are publicly published on the OAAA-QA website.
That's a deliberate design choice.
It is. Instead of just presenting a single ranking number, stakeholders, students, employers, ministries, can compare HEI performance based on their specific priorities.
So if an employer cares most about research and ethics, they can focus on standards 5 and 6 ratings.
Exactly. Or if a prospective student cares most about student support, they can focus entirely on the standard 3 ratings. This detailed transparency democratizes the assessment of quality.
This has been an incredibly rigorous journey through the ISAA manual. We covered the entire systematic approach from the foundational alignment with Omen Vision 2040 and the requirement for stable governance in Standard 1.
Right through to the commitment to verifiable public transparency and active alumni engagement in Standard 6.
And the clarity of the ADRI cycle, the absolute logical necessity of moving beyond policy writing to demonstrating deployment, results, and improvement, that's the inescapable thread holding the entire system together.
It is the logic that makes it manageable. The success of an HEI in this process truly hinges on demonstrating that closed-loop system that you consistently apply. Approach, show genuine deployment, link measurable results back with a proven causal relationship, and drive improvement.
So when HEIs approach the manual not as a bureaucratic exercise, but as a systematic quality management blueprint,
the entire compliance effort becomes logical and far easier to manage. It truly is a system built on transparency, rigor, and continuous enhancement.
I think the most fascinating tension inherent in this whole process, the thing that keeps the system honest, is the delicate balance between transparency and confidentiality.
That's a great point.
We just discussed that the entire system aims for radical transparency in the final published outcome, letting everyone see how the HEI performed against all 45 criteria.
And yet, to ensure the integrity of the critical data collection, the most crucial evidence of deployment, the ISAA relies entirely on the strict non-attribution rule, using Chatham House rules to keep the voices of staff and students confidential.
Right. So the question we leave you with is this. If the system demands radical transparency in its final findings to ensure public accountability, How does the rigorous enforcement of confidentiality during the data gathering phase, protecting the voices of the staff and students, ensure the integrity of the information while still maintaining the public's trust in the final published review?
That tension.
This tension between confidentiality and transparency is essential for understanding the true integrity of the review itself.
A powerful thought that highlights why institutional integrity is about more than just numbers. It's about trust in the process.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for tuning in.